Okay, my name is Kurt Wise. I'm a professor at Truett-McConnell University in Cleveland, Georgia, and I want to talk about the origin of caves. So the formal name for the origin of caves is Spelio Genesis. In particular, I want to talk about a particular theory of cave formation that I think is appropriate for young age creationism. But I have to go back to another theory. The theory that is currently common in the United States was made popular by J. Harlan Bretz. In other circles, he's kind of a hero of young age creationism because he argued for catastrophism of a certain sort, the origin of the channeled scablands in eastern Washington. But that's not the only thing he did. He also popularized a particular theory of cave formation that is most popular for today. So in publications in the 40s and up into the early 60s, he introduced the idea of something that we call hypergenic speleogenesis. The idea here is that, according to J. Harlan Bretz, water falls down from the clouds in the atmosphere and grabs up along the way a little bit of carbon dioxide, dissolves into the water, creating slightly acidic rainwater. Typically, rainwater is just a little bit acidic. There's also some acid that's added very often in the soil as the water goes through the soil, picks up organic acids, which are often much stronger acids than the acid from carbon dioxide, and that those acidic waters make their way down through the soil in what's called the vadose zone. That would be the zone above the water table, making its way to the water table, below which is called the phreatic zone. This is a zone that's supersaturated or saturated with respect to water. All the available holes in the rock and the soil are full of water from the water table down. And of course, that's the meaning of the water table, is that the upper surface of that body of water. So if you're familiar with lakes and rivers, typically a water table makes its way across to a low area where the area drops beneath the water table. The level of the lake is determined by the water table. So it's the surface expression of the water table from our perspective out here in the atmosphere. In hypergenic speleogenesis, the idea is as the water percolates down through the vadose zone to the water table, when it gets to the water table, there is a change in chemistry that occurs because the acidic waters from up above interact with a very different chemistry in the water table and below. And those chemical reactions are typically thought to be responsible for the erosion, the dissolution of, in particular, limestone, carbonate rocks like limestone and dolomite and that sort of thing. And so in hypergenic speleogenesis, cave erosion is a very gradual process that occurs as a very dilute acid from the surface erodes limestone at the water table. In order to get a large cave, it takes a long time. It takes probably thousands of years to do so. Also, to get verticality in the cave, for a cave to have many levels, you're going to have to change the water table. And of course, your water source is always from above. That is the theory of hypergenic speleogenesis. So it's caused by sinking fluids going to the water table. Hypogenic speleogenesis is an alternate theory for the origin of caves. It's become popular in Europe. It was introduced, I think, in Europe a few decades ago. The idea is that the waters are not coming from up above, they're actually coming from down below. And the waters are rising, sometimes hot, but very often very acidic. So whereas the water in hypergenic speleogenesis is a very weak acid, the water rising from below can be a very strong acid. It can be sulfuric acid, whatever the source rocks beneath will allow. And so here waters rise rather than drop, and so caves are eroded by rising waters rather than sinking waters. Now, back in 1989, I moved into the area of Dayton, Tennessee, to assume a job there. I worked there for 17 years. While I was there were a lot of caves in that given area. It's thought that there are 7,000 caves within 100 miles of Chattanooga, which is nearby. And I thought, since I was there, I'm a creationist, I probably should look into the origin of caves. So I began soon after I moved into the area to explore local caves. And I landed upon this particular cave. It's up in Grassy Cove, Tennessee. It was about a 45-minute drive from where I lived. Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave. It was mined during the Civil War for saltpeter for making gunpowder. It's found in Cumberland County, Tennessee. And I would take students with me on these cave excursions for safety purposes, and they loved it anyway. And I explored the cave system for about 10 years. Now, I did this before I knew anything about the hypogene speleogenic theory. And I was, all the time, by the way, what I was doing was I was mapping the cave and using that as an excuse to go into every little hole and examine the entire geology of the cave. I didn't get through all the cave. I mapped about 2 miles of cave passage, and there are about 10 miles of cave passage known in this cave system. But I observed a number of things in the cave that I found very curious. I can't tell you how many times I would stop with my students and look up at the ceiling and say, you know, if this cave was only upside down, I could explain the features that I find on the ceiling. But the ceiling's got stuff on it that I would expect to find on the floor, like rivers and things like that. And they're all upside down. There's so many of those things throughout the cave. Mystified me for a very long time until I heard a presentation at the Geological Society of America meeting by a European geologist who was visiting the States. And he introduced this Hypergenic speleogenesis theory. And he began to go through the evidences that you would expect to find in a cave that is formed by hypogene speleogenesis. By the way, that particular theory had become somewhat popular for explaining the western caves of the United States, some of the famous caves, 𝘎𝘕𝘃 caverns and so on, but not for the caves of eastern United States, the place where I was at. In fact, the geologist specifically said that it does not apply to the Cumberland Plateau caves, the caves that I was working in. But here we go. One thing, now it's going to be difficult. I got to explain in all these photographs how to see them. I'm looking straight up in this photograph, straight up into the ceiling. And one of the evidences that he proposed as evidence of hypogene speleogenesis is when you look up, you see these bowls in the ceiling, and then there's a smaller bowl inside that bowl, and a smaller bowl inside that bowl, getting smaller and smaller and farther up, and then they just end. He called them rising chains of blind ceiling cupulas. They're blind in the sense that they don't go anywhere, they just end. And this would be the idea of rising acidic waters that pool in the ceiling, because they're rising, and then eat their way progressively higher and higher into the ceiling until they lose their acidity and thus end up blind. So there's that one I just showed, and here's some other pictures from the same cave, from the Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave. These are all examples of blind, succeedingly smaller cupulas in the ceiling of the cave. So, by the way, what happened was I went to that talk at the Geological Society of America, and I was very excited because I said, wow, I got to check out the cave I've been looking at. And I went in 20 minutes and took all the photographs that you're seeing here. I mean, it was all over the place. It was, whoa, this is amazing, it's cool stuff. A second second type of evidence is often leading to these cupulas would be these channels that rise up the walls and lead to those channels. So rising ceiling cupulas to upper, and also those cupulas would sometimes open up into another story, like second story, third story, fourth story, and there would be another layer of cave up above. And this is the rising channels, rising cupulas, and it's opening into a passage that I actually mapped above it directly, and I saw that several times. There'd be these cracks in the ceiling, and these cupulas would rise into another passage that I had already mapped, right over the top of the passage that was taking the first pictures in. Here I'm in one passage, I'm looking up into a second passage at a second, and there's a third story above that. Again, I'm looking straight up. Hard to see. Here's one that goes quite a ways up, some 25 feet or so, up into a very large passage right above the one that I'm taking the photograph in. So this would be another evidence of the Hypergenic speleogenesis. Also, there's just these holes in the ceiling. Just, again, these things that if they were on the floor of the cave, I could see, well, you know, some acid sit down there and ate a little hole in the floor. But these are in the ceiling, literally holes all over the place in the ceiling. Also, these were most spectacular. Along passages, there would be these channels in the ceiling, and I'm looking again straight up at what looks like a river channel in the ceiling. Again, it makes sense if it was in the floor, I could see an erosion of a river channel. But these literally look like rivers on the ceiling of the cave. They would branch like feeder, like a tributary would branch into the main channel. They formed islands. It almost looks backwards here, but this is a channel, and this is a little island in the middle of the channel. So it's like a river that comes along, goes around an island. Here's a couple large islands with the river running around it. And again, these things are in the ceiling. They make sense if you've got rising acidic waters, which are eroding river channels in the same way that a river on the surface is eroding down. These are eroding up. Beautiful, in some cases, little rivers that would branch and come together, form larger and larger rivers. So here's one coming up from the wall, coming along, joining another one, producing a larger one. Here again, side, it looked like a river on the surface, but it's in the ceiling. And then there would be channels in the channels. And this is kind of common in the, like the Mississippi River might have a large channel that is tens of miles wide, but the river itself is cut into a smaller channel in the midst that winds around in the midst of the larger valley. And this has got a large valley with a river that's cut into it. This one's a little more obvious, a lot wide, call it river valley in the ceiling, with a smaller river that anastema. In fact, this one looks like it's got a big one, and then a smaller one, and then an even smaller one inside the smaller one. Then, as we move from the ceiling to the walls, we see that the ceiling cupulas have channels that go down the side of the wall towards the floor. Actually, it's rising from the floor up the wall and to the ceiling. Again, perspective is tough on these photographs, but this is straight up, this is off to the side. So the wall has channels that are coming together, rising up the wall and into the ceiling. Again, ceiling wall channels, 3 of them here, that unite together and then go straight up into an upper passage. So here's a number of channels coming into ceiling cupulas. All sorts of fun little structures. Again, the rivers that have been, some cases you can follow these channels in the ceiling for hundreds of feet, and then they come to a ceiling cupula and that's it, they're done, they're finished. And so it's as if they ran to that point and then eroded straight up and lost their acidity. So beautiful. Actually, some of them are quite spectacular. This is a nice wall channel that goes up into the ceiling, into a ceiling cupula again. Another feature, different kind of feature that's found in the cave, we find these tubes, horizontal tubes. This is straight into the wall. And then at the bottom of the tube are these vertical cracks. This is one of my favorite ones in that particular cave. You can just barely squeeze your way through this thing down below, but it's real easy to walk through this. These are called keyholes by the cavers, because it looks like the old-fashioned master key. You know, you have the large circular thing with a flat portion below it. So these are called keyholes, and they're very common in caves. These are again caused by rising waters that then move laterally, cutting these channels in the ceiling. Basically, channels in the ceiling can get bigger and bigger and bigger until they're a whole a channel you can walk through. So here is another keyhole with a larger channel up above. Here's a beautiful example, cut up to a very large keyhole there. There's another one there. Again, all these were found within 150 feet of the entrance to the cave. I took them all in 20 minutes. They're all over the place. I just never saw them until I was told what in the world they meant. So the channels here are going from the wall up into the ceiling again. So this is another example. Another thing you find there is very often where you have cracks in the rock, you will have the channels will go to those cracks, and obviously the channels are then going into the cracks and then rising to the unit that's above it. Another feature are these ceiling pendants. When you look at the ceiling, you see these, a very bumpy ceiling. Might think, oh, well, these are stalactites, stalagmites. They're not. This is the original country rock of the cave. It's been eroded, but why does it have that very rough texture? Basically, it's because if we look at it from directly underneath, you realize, oh, it's a whole bunch of these anastomosing river channels that leave these islands, and as the river channels get eroded deeper in, they leave these ceiling pendants behind, which, by the way, in a short cave is very painful, hitting these crazy things. Done it many, many times, where I usually wear a helmet in the cave because of it. Yeah, they can be pretty pointed all over the place in the cave. Also, we have tubes that run horizontally. They'll leave a large room, but not leave at the floor level. If water was coming down, you would expect it to leave at floor level. These are tubes that actually leave at near the ceiling and drive their way straight into the wall from there. This is in the entrance to the cave. This is one of my favorite places. It's just high enough that my shoulders come about there, and so my head can fit there. I can walk without bending over if I put my head in the groove. And I would always tell the students, get into the groove, and we could walk through the cave without bending over. These channels in the ceiling of the cave, so we're looking at, the ceiling would be straight up here. This is a horizontal channel very commonly found in the ceiling, near the ceiling, or in some cases right in the middle of the wall. Just go straight out into, you could trace it for hundreds of feet in some cases as it winds around through the limestone. So here's a wall channel. Here's a ceiling tube, a channel that comes away from it, that goes then into the ceiling. And also now as we're moving down, we've got stuff in the ceiling, we've got stuff in the wall. And if you follow the wall channels down, you often come to these pyramid-shaped large holes in the floor. There's mud down here, so you can't see where it goes, but it's evidence of water rising here, going up the wall channel towards the ceiling, which would be above us. Again, a large V-shaped source, or they're called floor inlets, and coming from somewhere underneath, buried now in mud, rises up the wall, funnels into a channel that then goes into a ceiling channel up above. Floor inlet and a wall channel above it. You can almost see it. Can you see it? You can almost picture the water flowing up. This doesn't make much sense going down. Again, a side channel up the wall. Another floor inlet with the channel going up towards the ceiling. An inlet channel going straight up towards the ceiling. Also, here's a series of floor inlets, and if they're close enough together, they leave these hanging pendants between them, pointed pendants that are, again, as you're ducking down to go into these crazy things, you hit your head on these things. I've been familiar with that many times. Another floor inlet with channels, more than one channel going upward towards the ceiling. Sometimes almost a knife-edged pendant is created by adjacent floor inlets. These knife blade pendants are very difficult to explain in other ways. It's very nicely explained by the rising acidic waters. And then a common feature that cavers are quite familiar with, what they call elephant feet. So we got adjacent floor inlets that leave a pendant behind, which is the shape of an elephant foot. They're actually somewhat common in caves. Weird structures that I never quite knew what they meant before. Also, another characteristic of this type of erosion, as it comes up from below, it makes its way through cracks, and cracks that are often perpendicular to each other, because in limestone carbonate rocks, very often they shrink and break in perpendicular directions. And the rising waters then produce a cave opening that when you map it, you get these maze structures. This is actually a map of the cave that I was mapping. So this would be, for size, I don't have a scale on here, but this would be a room about 20 feet wide, 40, 50 feet long. This is another room about 15 feet wide, about 40 feet long. But coming between them, you have these passages that connect them, and side passages that go in circles. When you plot them out, they create a mazework structure. This is characteristic of the Hypergenic Spelio Genesis. This is another cave map made of the same cave, made some 40 years before I did the mapping in a portion that I hadn't gotten to yet. The dotted lines indicate passages that are above the passages that are in dark. So this is the maze work pattern structure that's characteristic of the cave, and the multiple levels that is also true of Hypergenic Spelio Genesis. So in summary, what you have in Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave are all sorts of evidences of rising waters coming out of the rising, the fissure openings in the floor that go into, that create these hanging pendants and these elephant feet. They go up wall channels and anastomos, creating the ceiling pendants, rising cupulas. And all of this collectively, we have all of these evidences, every single one of the evidences that the European geologists pointed to as evidence of Hypergenic speleogenesis, I found in 20 minutes in the cave I'd been working in for 10 years. So my conclusion, first conclusion is that Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave was formed by Hypergenic speleogenesis. Now, this is significant for several reasons. One, the person that introduced the concept to me, the European geologist, specifically said it did not apply to the Cumberland Plateau. I think he actually did it politically correct thing to say, because J. Harlan Bretz made the other theory famous in the Cumberland Plateau, and so he didn't want to go too much against the common belief. But this is a cave, one cave on the Cumberland Plateau that is definitely formed by Hypergenic speleogenesis. But speaking of generalizing, if you look at a number of caves, I've only been in about 40 of them in that region of Tennessee, tagged Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, but reading literature and talking to other cavers, it's very common that the limestone caves of the Cumberland Plateau have features when you map them that have nothing to do with what's going on the surface. Very often the highest point in a cave is very often the very highest point in the topography. It's well above the water table. There's no way you could explain this thing by the erosion at water table. You've got caves that rise in places where the land is lowering. The surface topography seems to have nothing to do with the structure of the cave itself. Very, very common. Also, many caves have these vertical shafts that you enter the cave at. There's one just up the hill from Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave that's got a 241-foot drop in the entrance. It's a big hole in the ground. So you go 241 feet straight down before you can get to the ground, before you can go laterally. This is not what you'd expect of groundwater that's seeping down and hitting water coming from the surface, getting the groundwater level and creating a vertical or horizontal cave. You can't explain these vertical entrances, but most of these caves have vertical entrance shafts. Also, they look a lot alike. I can take my pictures from Grassy Cove Saltpeter Cave and show it to another caver, and they cannot distinguish that cave from the many that they have seen either. Furthermore, what I've done is a friend of mine asked how he could help us out here, and I said, well, one thing that would be good is to see if the features that I see in Grassy Cove Saltpeter are true of all of the caves in the Cumberland Plateau. Well, there are thousands of caves in the Cumberland Plateau. No, we're not going to be able to do a complete survey to do that. But I thought, hey, here's a way to do it. If we just look at all the show caves, so all the commercial caves, just visit every single commercial cave that's available in eastern United States. If we find speleogenesis, Hypergenic speleogenesis evidence in all of those caves, then I think we can make a pretty good argument that it's true of all of the caves, even though there's only probably 100 or a couple hundred such show caves. Given that show caves specifically are looking for really pretty stuff, by the way, the pretty stuff are the stalactites and stalagmites that hide these evidences. These are things that come into the cave after the formation of the cave that are attempting to fill the cave. they're not going to go into the part of the cave that doesn't have stalactites and stalagmites. They're going to go into that part of the cave where these evidences are obscured. If we can see evidence of speleogenesis, hypogene speleogenesis in even those caves, then I think we got a pretty good argument that it's probably true of all the caves of the plateau. And he has visited some, I can't remember what the figure is, some 70 caves so far in Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Virginia. I think he's gotten up into New York. And he's found evidence of multiple evidences of hypogene speleogenesis in every single cave. So far, it's looking like all the show caves in eastern United States are formed or were formed by hypogene speleogenesis. Since the conventional geologists believe most of the western caves are formed by hypogene speleogenesis, it's very possible, I'm going to make that jump, I'm going to suggest that all limestone caves, I'm going to say worldwide, were formed by hypogene speleogenesis, not by hypergene speleogenesis as J. Harlan Britz suggested. So what? Now we get to the good stuff. One thing about hypogene speleogenesis, the speed at which it operates is really dependent upon the temperature and the acidity of the water. Hypergene speleogenesis takes a long time, almost certainly hundreds to thousands of years. But hypogene speleogenesis can potentially occur in the matter of hours, days, or weeks. Actually, just about any amount of time that you postulate, depending upon the concentration of the acids. So as a result, hypogene speleogenesis can occur within biblical timescales. It could occur within the flood, after the flood. It could fit into the biblical time. That's the first good news. Secondly, in order for hypergene speleogenesis to work, you need water from above, and you need a water table that's below the land surface. Well, that doesn't work during the flood. During the flood, the water table is above the land surface. So you wouldn't, hypergene speleogenesis doesn't have any cave formation during the flood. The flood doesn't speed up hypergene speleogenesis, it stops it. In contrast, hypogene speleogenesis needs water from below, needs water that is acidic from below. And the nice thing about flood model is if in fact most of the limestone is formed during the flood, and most of the limestone is not formed at the beginning of the flood, but during the flood, then all of the water-laden sediments that are laid down before the limestone are the source of water for eroding the limestone above it. So, and plus we've got all sorts of chemistry going on that can add the acidity that we need. So the flood actually provides the water necessary beneath the limestone for hypogene speleogenesis to work, and to work very quickly. And what's interesting here too is that as we argue that hypogene speleogenesis is the only or the primary method by which caves are formed, the conventional model has a very difficult time explaining where those waters came from. The flood model produces an explanation for it. It becomes a challenge to the other model. Also, another thing that's very curious as far as fossil record is concerned, one thing that's very curious about the fossil record of caves is that we have no fossils in cave sediments that are older than the Pleistocene. This is amazing. This is really cool. So we're now talking about, you've already got a cave, and you got some mud in the cave, and then you got bones of things that crawled into the cave and are fossilized in the inside of the cave. It's what most people would think of as fossils in a cave. They're not in the limestone that the cave is carved out of. They're in the mud that fills the cave. And again, this the first time I realized this when I was looking at the fossil record and examining it, just blew my mind. We have no fossils in cave sediments that are older than the Pleistocene. So in a pile of rocks, tens of thousands of feet thick across the surface of the Earth, cave fossils are only found in the very top. They are not found in any of the, now there are caves, we have caves that are older than that, but they're filled with sediment that does not have fossils in it. They don't have animal fossils, land fossils. There's no, you would expect if the Earth is very old and it's always had caves, there's always been some land animals that wandered into a cave and got buried in there, and you should find land animal fossils in caves all the way back to the oldest rocks of the planet. We have caves, we have holes in rock full of younger sediment, but we have no land fossils in any of those caves until the Pleistocene, which suggests, and that makes a whole lot of sense here, because if the rocks that the caves are cut into were formed in the flood, and the rising waters that eroded them and created the caves occurred in the flood or thereafter, the very first time in Earth history that you'd have been able to crawl into a cave, a limestone cave, would have been after the floodwaters have left the continents and brought the water table down, dried out the caves, and allowed the animals to get into the caves. Thus we can explain why there are no cave sediment fossils older than the Pleistocene. Even, this is so much fun, we've got fossil bats in the fossil record. They're beautiful, beautiful fossil bats. The oldest fossil bats are not found in cave sediments. They are found in lake sediments. We have cave animals that are in the fossil record, but when we find them, the oldest ones are not found in cave sediments. They're found outside of cave sediments. It's not until the Pleistocene that we finally get bats preserved in cave sediments. So Hypergenic Spelio Genesis explains why land animal fossils do not get into caves until the Pleistocene. And that also would indicate the Pleistocene is after the flood, which we'd already believed it was. The conventional model has a very hard time explaining that. So I believe in Hypergenic Spelio Genesis, not only do we have a model for the origin of caves in a biblical timescale, but we actually have a model that explains features of caves that cannot be explained by the conventional model.